Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Saturday morning. My name is Steven, and I'm the host. And as always, I'm joined by my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Doing well, man. This time next week, we'll know at least their first three selections, but potentially more if they trade
Yeah,
back.
yeah, 100%. Coming down the home stretch here. We've decided to go live again on Monday and Tuesday. So basically, next week we're going to be live every day except for Wednesday for you guys. So hopefully you are excited about that. We're excited about that as we come down the home stretch of the draft. Today we are going to touch on some of the comments from Mr. Joe Hortiz in his press conference, as well as the addition of one JK Dobbins. And then we're going to talk specifically, kind of expanding on Hortiz's comments about some trade down scenarios for the Chargers that they could be looking at in round one. And so that should be a ton of fun. As always, today's show is presented by our friends over at Prize Picks, the best and easiest way to use fantasy sports over at prizepicks.com/guilty. All right, let's start with one JK Dobbins. We do not know the official terms of the deal just yet, but we know it's a 1-year deal. I'd be pretty surprised if it's like for that much more than the minimum at this point in his career. We know that he visited with the Chargers a few weeks ago, then he visited with the Chiefs. I don't know if there were other visits in there. There were reportedly a few teams interested in JK Dobbins when he first started his kind of free agency tour here. Tyler, what are your thoughts as we now we have Gus Edwards and JK Dobbins in the Chargers backfield?
Yeah, so I saw the reaction to the news before I saw the news, and the reactions I was reading was like, okay, we're getting J.K. Dobbins. We're going to resurrect his career, and his career is going to be great, and it might be. And initially, I thought, like, okay, but he is coming from a pretty good organization in the Ravens. It's not like he's coming from a bad organization. But then I remembered the Ravens for the last 3 years are one of the worst teams in adjusted games lost due to injury.
Mm-hmm.
Less last year, but specifically the previous 2 years.
Yep.
So I actually think there is some value and merit to people saying that his career could be resurrected because we put a lot of faith in the Chargers and Harbaugh and Ben Herbert to turn a lot of careers around. And I think actually, yeah, he could be in a better situation here because the Ravens have not been very lucky when it comes to injuries as of late. This move is like what I'd want the Chargers to be doing, whether it's a former first round pick or him as a second round pick, I believe. Like, this is what I want the Chargers to be doing when they can, because if this doesn't work out, if this is a total flame out, he never sees the field, it didn't cost anybody anything. It didn't do anything to hurt the team. It's as buy low as you can get, basically. But the reward here is so high, I think. Now, we'll get into some of Joe Hortiz's comments. I don't think it necessarily changes their draft strategy, but it just allows them, and with the addition of Gus Edwards, to just be patient. This is, I think, a deep class of running backs. There's no Bijan Robinson, there's no Jahmyr Gibbs, but there are some guys, two we love, at the beginning, maybe in like round 3, but technically they can go round 2.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys in this class, so you can wait. You do not have to reach in any specific round for a running back. You can wait and you can be patient. And with J.K. Dobbins, like, this is a guy who averaged almost 6 yards per carry in his very short, but in his career with the Ravens. And now he is with Greg Roman again. Like, there's a lot here. There could be a pretty high reward for the signing. So I love it. Low risk, high reward. It's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, like you mentioned, these are moves that the previous regime shied away from. These kind of dart throws, low risk, high rewards, and this is a perfect scenario for the Chargers because, like you mentioned, the on-field reward here is fantastic. If he's healthy and he balls out and then he goes and gets another contract from another team somewhere, then you're potentially talking about a compensatory pick in 2025, or I guess that would be 2026. So there's no downside here for the Chargers. And like you mentioned, I do agree that this should not change their draft plans. I think on the field, J.K. Dobbins, when he's been healthy, has been fantastic. And when he was a rookie in 2020, he was top 10 in the league in yards after contact per attempt and top 10 in missed tackles forced per attempt. This is a guy that could have been on his way to being like a legit RB1 in the league. And then you obviously have the ACL and then you have the Achilles. So he says that he's going to be healthy by training camp, and Joe Ortiz says the same kind of sentiment, and we'll see what happens there. Achilles coming off of an ACL, that's definitely scary. But if Dobbins is kind of your RB3, then there's no downside. If he's your RB2 even, there's no real downside. So Gus Edwards is going to be their lead back. We'll see what happens in the draft. If like a Trey Benson falls to them at pick 69, I don't think this signing precludes them from passing on him, or a Jonathan Brooks. If that happens, that seems to be kind of maybe less likely based off of like how the league is talking about him. But I think this draft sets up really nicely for them, where they don't have to force the issue. They can pick if they want to wait and take a Blake Watson on day 3 and get their version of a Keaton Mitchell or a Bucky Irving, then great. If they feel like they do want a potential future like RB1, then they can take one at pick 69 or pick 104, pick 110. So it just echoes Joe's sentiments, where he talked a lot about like fortifying the depth, and you just want depth across the board. And this is one way to do that at the running back spot.
Yeah, I agree. So I didn't watch JK Dobbins coming out of college that year. I just didn't watch.
Yeah.
I guess like you might think he's RB1 in this class if he came out this year. I have no idea, but like who is he in this class in terms of like stylistically, or who's a comp for him kind of in this class, or what is his style?
Stylistically in this class, I would say probably Brooks.
Okay. All right.
He's not unphysical. Like he is capable of like being a physical back, but he's much more of a slasher, explosive running back
Mhm.
like Brooks is.
Okay.
Vision, bounce it outside, has the speed over the top. I'm pretty sure I had Dobbins as my RB1 that year.
Mhm.
I think it's just a matter of obviously how much juice does he have now at this point. But stylistically, I would say Brooks would probably be the closest one for this year's class.
Okay. Gotcha. As a pass catcher, like fine.
Yeah, he can work as a pass catcher. It's
Okay.
not his like forte, but he's never really been asked to do it because the Ravens have always
Right.
had like that Justice Hill type, Keaton
Mhm.
Mitchell type. So that's the thing about what Greg Roman has always preferred, is he does have like very specific roles for the running back room.
Mhm.
And so I don't think Edwards or Dobbins are really going to be able to impact the game much as a pass catcher. It's going to be like some screens and things like that, but it's not going to be it's obviously not going to be what Austin Eckler has been. But
No.
they kind of platoon the pass catching role among the 3 backs.
Gotcha.
So yeah. Looks like we got a new member today, so appreciate Mr. David here for signing up. Make sure if you're in the tier high enough to sign up for the Discord, but we appreciate you, David.
What's up, David?
Okay, Tyler, any other thoughts on Mr. JK Dobbins?
Not necessarily.
Okay. A lot of people have asked us about Isaiah Spiller. I don't know, man. I think this regime didn't draft him. He doesn't really like fit stylistically. I think if Isaiah Spiller makes the roster at this point, I think I'd kind of would be surprised.
Yeah, unless because they have Darius Davis. So unless they feel for some reason, but then it's Fickens. So it's not like it's a new regime change there.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like maybe a return on special teams and it benefits him, but it doesn't really, at least not directly. So if it's a strength, size, physical issue for Spiller, that will get solved at least, or as close as it can be. So if that was part of the issue, great, like that can get solved. But when granted, same head coach, but if 2 different offensive coordinators basically have no idea what to do with you as the running back, it's shaky. So, I mean, like as of right now, he's making the roster, but like they're going to carry a fullback, it looks like, right? So will they even carry 4 running backs? So yeah, it's dicey. We'll see what happens after the draft, of course, but like I don't see why they wouldn't just roll with Dotson if they had to pick between the 2.
Right.
Because it's a whole different regime.
Yeah, and I think the new kickoff rule lends itself more favorably towards Dotson than Spiller, because Dotson can return kickoffs, and he's shown the ability to play on like punt coverage and things like that. So Dotson can play special teams. This Ryan Figgin clearly does not trust Isaiah Spiller to play special teams, or else he would have been doing that. So it's unfortunate. Like I think there's a lot of things to like about Isaiah Spiller's game, and we've seen some cool flashes of it. But at the end of the day, I think this regime didn't draft him. They were not the ones who, have been coaching him. So I think it's just going to be time to move on.
Yeah, I agree. It feels a bit like Joe Reed, where it's like, okay, I could see a role. There's some stuff there, early day 3 pick, but then he gets hurt, and then they never really just found a spot. And so, I don't think it's a player who's not talented. They just couldn't make it work, and that happens in the NFL.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some of these comments from Mr. Joe Hortiz. I think the bulk of what we're going to talk about is regarding the trade conversation, but I want to start this off here because Joe was asked about the offensive line, and he gave some really good quotes, basically kind of echoing the sentiment that Daniel Popper had on our show, and the quote specifically that I liked. He was asked about the need to add a starting offensive lineman, and he said, "quote I think we could go out and play football today. I do believe that 100%. But the best players, you just take them because what you do is you create great depth and you create great competition, and then the best players play." He cited several times that he does really, really like this offensive line room. They've been in their building and he's had really good impressions of them. But I thought his quote specifically of like, if we were playing a game today, like we feel comfortable with the five that we have, was certainly worth talking about as it pertains to the draft next week.
Yeah, I agree with his assessment. Hopefully, they get months to actually train together and work together. So don't play today. Um, but yeah, there are pieces along this offensive line, and we talked. You mentioned with Daniel Popper, we talked about that. Like, it's not a terribly untalented group. This isn't 2020 or 2019 Chargers where it was just like, if you exist, you can be a starting offensive lineman for us. There's a lot of great pieces along this offensive line. Most of it, or some of it, just untapped potential. So I think I'm really focusing more on like the competition part, where we'll just let the best guys play. We'll take the best guys available. And
Sure.
yeah, like your mind naturally drifts to right tackle, but to me, it continues. The thing that really is like the quiet part, but it's loud, feels like right guard. And just specifically like, hey, maybe we can't find a role for this guy this year. Like maybe he's not a right tackle this year. We're gonna let right tackle play out, but we'll compete at right guard or even center.
Mm-hmm.
So I think yeah, I think they'll take a center early anyway, or early enough where it's like a legit competition. But you find a guy who can play multiple spots, or maybe Fuanga could play like right tackle next year, but maybe this year it'll just be right guard and compete there, or compete at right tackle. There's going to be competition. So I think outside of Zion and Slater, the other three, their jobs are not up for grabs, but it's not a secure spot.
I think up for grabs is fair to say. Maybe not Bozeman's, but I think like the other three spots are 100%. I think going to have a competition, and I think for me this is just significant because the way that like draft media talks about the Chargers offensive line is like, oh man, like they have Slater and like nothing else, and that's just not true. Obviously, there are some question marks, but if this regime feels right now that they trust these five that they have, I think it makes it easier to truly go kind of with the best player approach. And a lot of he said that comment again, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, like this means wide receiver at five." Not necessarily. Like there is a chance that they internally do have Joe Alt as their number one player overall. I don't know if that is the case, but like there's some people on draft media who have Joe Alt as the best player outside of the quarterback. So it's not like it's not like that is totally out of the realm of possibilities. I would think that it would be the wide receivers, but the best player approach thing that he said like repeatedly throughout this process. Did you have any takeaways there? He kind of cited the Kyle Hamilton example. They signed Marcus Williams. They still draft Kyle Hamilton. Did you have any thoughts about his best player available comments?
Nothing particularly new. I just think if they get to a spot and it's like, well, it's not a perfect, there's no player at this position, if it's not just a perfect, hey, here's a free spot to start, they'll take their best player available.
Yeah.
So yeah, that does feel very offensive line to me. It feels very wide receiver to me. Probably tight end as well. I guess running back. Like they won't be afraid to just go take, I don't know, running back in some round and have them compete with like Gus Edwards. Like they'll just compete. Best guys out there.
Yeah. I think that's kind of where this team is at. Obviously, we've talked about this before. Robert Mays pointed this out, and I never really thought of this in this way. But obviously, there's a chance next year that Trey Pipkins is cut, Joey Bosa is cut, and so if they move on from those two players, The only 3 players on the Chargers roster that would be projected to be making more than $5 million on their contracts would be Herbert, Derwin, and Rashawn Slater. That's it. That's just $5 million. That's not even like 10. That's just 5. So it's the roster is in much more of a, I don't want to say full rebuild because it's Harbaugh and Hortiz and like they have good players, but it's kind of like a competitive rebuild where they just need a lot of players, and if they can hit this draft out of the park, that helps tremendously. But Hortiz did also say like we want more volume in this draft, so I thought that comment too also kind of lended itself towards, hey man, like they understand where this roster is at. I think their free agency approach has shown that, and I think we will see them play the board quite a bit next week because they know that they need more players.
Yeah, they definitely do. We've been over that several times. They need a lot more players, and we'll discuss those scenarios in just a bit. You know, the players that they're going to bring in starting next Thursday and the guys they brought in free agency, those are their scheme fits, their identity fits. It's exactly what they want. They're not competing against guys who may not fit, at least initially. They don't feel like they fit or don't fit at all in terms of their identity and their culture or whatever. So, yeah, there'll be some competition, and maybe a player that we think is better and we graded as a better prospect or would have had as a better prospect, they just don't fit, or they don't, the program just doesn't suit them, or whatever it is, like just doesn't quite gel. And so best guy will win. And like you said, like they got to find more players.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put that. Okay, so the trade comments will kind of wrap up there, but did you have any other takeaways from his press conference?
No, I think a lot of it was some of the stuff they've repeated or expected things like, you know, wide receivers, a deep class, and we can find receivers at different spots. Like, yeah, that's true. We'll just see, you know, whether he really means that and we'll take several receivers, or if he's just like, yeah, it's a deep class.
Yeah. My last thing, I guess, would be his comment about the defensive tackle room. Like they feel like they have some versatility, so they're not going to like, you know, I don't think they're going to shy away from taking like a gap shooter or like a 2-gapper. Like they just need talent in that room. So that is a position that I think the Chargers will be taking earlier than like the fan base, I think is admitting, maybe at 37 if the right guy is there. But I think day 2 defensive tackle is pretty safe.
Yeah. I think I'd agree. Again, it comes down to best player available, right? But
yeah,
37 feels tough because I don't know if I personally feel like there's a player at 37 at D tackle who will also be best player available.
Well, that would be Hall. Hall would be like the only one.
Yeah. And I'm 50. You know, if that's their fit, that's their fit. Great. Like, he's an awesome player, but we'll see if he's their fit.
Yeah, that's fair. But both of us are lower on Chris Jenkins, who a lot of people have pegged them as a pick number 37 spot. But
yeah, I feel like a little further back for that one.
Yeah, if they trade out in the second round, cool.
Mm-hmm.
But from the Michigan players, I would be most disappointed in that pick at 37.
Yeah, that feels like Sainer still to me, but I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah. All right. Before we get into our trade scenarios here, Tyler, why don't you tell our friends over our friends here in the chat about Prize Picks?
Yeah, Prize Picks. Hey, the NBA playoffs are starting, so I got a recommendation for you. Alex Insdorf's Sixers are going to be playing, and I want you to wait until the moment that it looks like they're going to do something really good, and then go to Prize Picks and use the code GUILTY to get a first deposit match up to $100, and then just pick less for everything the Sixers are going to do. And you can pick between 2 and 6 players, so just pick less, right? You'll get instant payouts as soon as, you know, the game's wrapped up or whatever it is. So go to prizepicks.com/guilty, use the code GUILTY at checkout for a first deposit match up to $100. Look at whatever the Sixers are doing. Wait till it's really good and Alex Insdorf starts like saying like really positive things, and then just smash the less. You'll thank me later.
It's really funny because Alex is very calculated with his Chargers fandom, but then when it comes to the Sixers, it's so irrational. It's so like up and down. We're back, baby. We're terrible. It's really funny to watch. I appreciate Alex. Alex had a great interview on the channel yesterday with Benjamin Solak. So please go check that out. It was really great to have Benjamin Solak on this channel. We've been trying to get him for about a year or so. So it was a fun one. I have to tell you guys about Unified Health as well. Whether you are a world-class athlete or a podcaster like Tyler and I, we all understand the importance of mental and physical well-being and proper recovery for top-notch performance. That's why we are so excited this year that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. Now, Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by the Energy Enhancement System, or the EE system. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up, because this technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in Fresno, down in Orange County, or Los Angeles, or wherever the case may be. I don't think they have one in Aruba or Antigua or wherever Alex is, but definitely in the United States. You can check out unified.com or unifiedhealing.com, /guilty to find the nearest location near you. No material or testimonies on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. Again, that is unifiedhealing.com /guilty.
Awesome.
All right. Let's get into these trade scenarios. So we have 5 different scenarios that we are going to be talking about, tying in Joe Hortiz's comments. And I think we kind of approach this as setting the table of what he would classify as like a fair trade. And so we'll talk about that. We used the Spielberger Fitzgerald chart on Over the Cap to kind of justify the point value system. Teams have their own charts. There's the chart from Draft Tech. There's obviously the chart from, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on his name, Jimmy Johnson. So there's different ways for people to value trades, but the Spielberger Fitzgerald chart, I feel like is the best one to judge here. So this is kind of the point basis of what we're going to be talking about in this episode today.
Yeah, we're not looking for, oh, that's nice, like it's a wash it. And Hortiz mentioned that as much. Like we're not just looking for the oh yay, it's a perfect point match. Like me personally, whether it's Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors there at 5, I'm sticking and picking. So you got to show me something that's a heck of a set of draft capital for the Chargers to pick up. Even some of the ones that we have here, like I don't love, but they're the best options that are realistic, but also a decent haul.
Yeah. So we'll dive in here. The first scenario is that the Chargers stick within the top 10. He had this quote: "If 4 quarterbacks go, we believe strongly that we have the first pick of the draft. So what are teams willing to give us?" This is the same sentiment that Jim Harbaugh presented at the owners regime. They're not going to move off of pick 5 just because. And so I think that's kind of where we're going to try and set the table of like a fair trade. And then we'll talk about like what else has to be on top of that. So trading within the top 10, that means the Chicago Bears or the New York Jets here. I'll talk about the Bears trade first. I know that they do not have a ton of capital. They only have 4 picks in this draft. I get it, but there are rumors that they would want to trade up for one of these wide receivers. So in this hypothetical scenario, the Chargers could get pick number 9 plus 75. That would equal about 2,699 points. The Bears get the 5th overall pick, which is 2,184 points. So again, that's kind of the baseline here. The Chargers in this scenario would gain 515 points, and that to me would merit including a 2025 third round pick, which would be kind of similar, like around 800 points ish, to bump that up over 1,000 there. Tyler, what are your thoughts about trading down with the Chicago Bears?
I don't love it because so again, my perspective is if Neighbors is there, and he will be there, probably, you take him. But if the Chargers are not going wide receiver, like if they are just not going wide receiver at 5, then yeah, this is, I think, a really solid selection, whether it's the Bears at 9 or we'll talk about the Jets at 10. Just being able to pick up another 3rd round pick and still get your offensive lineman. If you want to go offensive tackle, hey, at least you took an offensive tackle and got a 3rd round pick out of it too. So, you can go get, I don't know if you feel like it's too early or too late for JC Latham, but like you can go JC Latham and then have a 3rd round pick. And I was running through these scenarios today, just on like the Pro Football Focus simulator. And it doesn't sound like a lot, like, oh, you're going to get a 3rd round pick. Go do a mock draft. Go have fun with that extra 3rd round pick. And just be able to take, okay, let's say you take Mason McCormick and then Kyrie Jackson. Like, wow, okay, that's a whole different, looking roster. And you still got your offensive tackle. Heck, you could also trade back to 9 or 10 and still get Rome Odunze or Brock Bowers. So if you don't mind, and you'll just take the next best like receiving offensive weapon and also pick up that 3rd round pick, not bad. So I do like the extra 3rd round pick, of course. I'm still leaning, sticking, and picking here. But it's not bad. And for the Jets one, it's pretty similar. They get the 10th overall pick. Then they get their 72nd pick in this draft. Jets don't have a ton of options this year either, so they could also offer up a 2025 selection. It could be instead of a 2024 third, it could be a 2025 second or whatever. Great. I didn't edit that one, so it says Bears get. So the Bears aren't getting the trade from the Jets trade. But the Jets are going to get the 5th overall pick, and the Chargers will gain 532 points in draft value. So again, if you're not super keen on taking in a receiver, which the Chargers might not be, then I love trading back. But I still prefer sticking and picking.
Yeah, I think this scenario for me works a little bit better than like trading down potentially with the Vikings or later on, because like you mentioned, there still is the chance that Odunze or Bowers are on the board at 10. I happen to think that the Jets, if they stick at 10, they're taking Bowers because I believe that they are in like win now mode. They want to maximize this Rodgers window, and then Brock Bowers kind of would be the best pick for them. So that's kind of my scenario here, where if you trade down, you are still able to land one of the blue chip pass catchers. It might not be your receiver, it might be Bowers. So that's kind of the debate, right? And I think for either one of these scenarios, you are getting a 2025 pick as well. Like to me, a fair trade would just be, hey, like let's move down a few spots, send me your 3rd round pick, and that's like a fair trade. But Hortiz said that he's not going to do that. Like it is going to have to be, some extra compensation. And so for me, that's a 2025 selection. Maybe it's a 2nd round pick if you can like really convince the team, or it's another 3rd round pick next year. So
yeah,
there's some pros and cons there about being able to still get a blue chip player. Maybe you get your offensive tackle of choice, plus a top 100 pick this year, plus a top 100 pick next year. And maybe for this regime, Joe Ortiz mentioned volume. Maybe that's the kind of volume that they would really like to have.
Yeah, I would agree. So this would make some sense. And heck, the Ravens have always, traded back and then traded up. They could do that in the 1st round. Like, hey, they go to 9 and they move to 8. Yeah. I don't know. Like there's plenty they could do.
Yeah. And you can always you can move up and down the value board here. So if you look at like what the Eagles got for the Jalen Waddle trade, they sent a 5th round pick and got a future 1st. So you can do something creative like that if your goal is to get 2025 capital. Like if you want a 2025 1st instead of a 3rd round pick this year, you can kind of maneuver the board a bit here in terms of the value chart and be able to get a 1st round pick next year. I think is not completely unrealistic, especially for the Jets, who are like in very much a desperate mode to win right now.
Yeah, it almost feels like they have a year and then that's potentially it. I know Rodgers probably wants to play for more, but you never know with Aaron Rodgers, that's for sure. Another scenario we've been considering is the quarterback tax trade, which I think is the one I'm the most interested in because it is the most capital they can probably get. Because whoever it is, and we'll talk about 2 teams, there's potentially 3 or even 4 teams. You got to give up the most for the quarterback. Like this is the most, like it requires you to give up a lot to get this player trade back. Like you have to give up more to get the quarterback. And as Joe Hortiz has said, it's a fair trade. It's a wash. I don't think that's a trade that we're interested in. Like this to me feels like the only way you're going to get us to move out of either Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors is a heck of a haul. And we have the baseline for that here on the next slide, but I feel like they could even ask for more. What we're doing in this scenario is trying to mirror the Bucs Bills trade from a few years ago, where the Bucs got the 12th overall pick, or they traded back for the 12th overall pick. And then they got 2 2nd round picks, and Buffalo traded up to 7th overall for Josh Allen. And then they also got a 2018 7th round pick. So, hey, they at least got that pick as well. I didn't consider that for our trade scenarios, but they got a haul. I mean, to trade back 5 spots and get 2 2nd round picks is awesome. So that there for the Chargers would be incredible.
I wonder who they took with those picks.
I used to know this.
I'm going to look real quick. Sorry. Just because I'm curious. It was 53 and 56, right?
I believe it's 55. Sorry, 53, 56.
Oh, so they took some guy named MJ Stewart, who I do not recognize. And then they took Carlton Davis. So they actually traded down from 56 to get Carlton Davis, and then they stacked up some other picks. So That's pretty good. Carlton Davis has been a quality player for them. They just traded him, but
Yeah.
that's pretty good process for them. But yeah, basically the goal here with the quarterback tax, you're trying to gain at least 1,500 points, I think, on the draft chart. So with the Vikings, what that potentially looks like is that you gain 11, 23, and then some other pick to kind of fill in the gap. So 11 plus 23 equals 3,196 points. Number 5 equals 2,184 points. So that's 1,012. So you're trying to get to 1,500 or more because of the quarterback tax. So you're talking about probably a 2025 third round pick, or I don't think they have a 2025 second anymore. Maybe you do 11 and a third round pick this year for a first round next year. Some kind of combination of the extra first and a day 2 pick of sorts gets you to 1,500 points from the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I agree. And this is the trade I'm most interested in. As soon as they came up and had that 23rd pick and the 11th pick, it's like that's a heck of a haul for the Chargers, especially if they get something else. So as Charger 4521 points out, Mel Kiper has the Bolts getting 11-23 and a 2025 first in his mock draft with the Vikings. That would be ideal, obviously. That would be like best case scenario by far. What was Bruce Feldman's haul for the Chargers, though, trading back to 11? Because it definitely was not that.
I think it was 11-23 in next year's third.
Okay, so 11-23 in next year's third. That's pretty good too. Like, I'll take that. You get to make 2 top 25 selections, especially 1 at 11, where you could still easily get Brian Thomas Jr., Murphy, Newton, Latham, Verse, Latu, whatever. Like, that's fantastic. And then at 23, there's a heck of a player at that spot for sure. So love that. 2025 third would be awesome too.
Yeah, the 2025 first, I think, is really only on the table if you are not taking 23, because at the end of the day, this is probably for QB4. In a scenario where the Patriots say, "Hey, like we're just going to take Marvin Harrison Jr." and then maybe the Cardinals take Malik Neighbors, I don't think that's like completely out of the realm of possibility. So then it's QB3, and then it's Drake May instead of JJ McCarthy. Maybe you can get 3 first round picks out of the Vikings. But if it's QBs 1 through 3, and then you're talking about QB4, I don't think the tax is high enough to get 11, 23, and next year's first. So if it's QB4, I happen to think it's 11, 23, and next year's third. But that's just kind of like how I think the trade value chart would kind of dictate things.
Yeah, I agree. That would be a huge win. That I would sing and dance on draft night if they were able to get that haul.
Yeah, 100%. 11 and 23 this year, you'd have 4 picks in the top 70. It'd be fantastic for the Chargers. Then you could trade down from 23, create more picks. It just creates so many possibilities for the Chargers. Okay, so the Las Vegas Raiders reportedly are very interested in trading up. There's obviously the Antonio Pierce, Jaden Daniels connection, although it seems like Jaden Daniels is potentially going number 2 overall. So from this trade chart value, obviously we've talked about 5, which is the 2,184 points. Pick 13 plus 44 gets you to 2,782. So that scenario, you're talking about 13, 44, and probably next year's first round pick. So this, depending on how you value like 13 and 44 instead of 11 and 23 and next year's first, this might be like a more desirable trade, because in this scenario, you are guaranteed to get a first round pick next year.
Yeah, and I know it's a bit of a deal with the devil sort of thing, but like, I don't know, man. Telesco's running the show, so I don't know how good they're going to be overall. So, and even with the Vikings, but in particular with the Raiders, like you get their first round pick, you're kind of assuming they're going to be third in their division. They're not going to be first in their division. You're hoping at least the Chargers are second. So they're third in their division. So they're picking around here this time next year. The Chargers have themselves a top 15, if not better, selection next year. Awesome. Now, to me, this trade is like you better give me the best possible offer, and otherwise you can just blow it out your ass.
Yeah, because division rival tax. Yep.
Yeah. So if it's multiple firsts or whatever, hey, I think that's only fair. Like you pick up the call and go, here's the stupid offer that you have to make me. And if they make it, great. Telesco has been aggressive, so we know he could be aggressive. But yeah, unfortunately it ends up being the best haul if you trade with the Broncos or the Raiders, who are desperate for a quarterback. It's just your division rival. But like I said when we talked about this before, I don't really care about those two teams as much. I'm trying to beat the Chiefs.
Right.
And if this is what the Jim Harbaugh thinks is the best way to climb and get past the Chiefs to get the most talent possible, and you'll figure out the Raiders and Broncos and JJ McCarthy later on, we'll see. I also think that does make it an emotional thing, right? If it's JJ McCarthy, what's Harbaugh willing to give up
Sure.
to give a division rival JJ McCarthy, who he thinks is, quarterback 1 in this class quarterback 2 after Braylon Allen. So if you saw that tweet.
Yeah. Hey, man, he can take Keenan Allen's QB2 role for sure.
There you go. But yeah, as Alex points out, rooting for the Raiders to get Penix. It's kind of what I feel like. I don't know. I just don't see the Raiders being the highest bidder. The Vikings the most prepped to be like, hey, hello, we got 11 and 23. So ultimately, I think it'll be the Vikings. That sounds great too. And then, NFC team, great. Go over there.
Yeah.
Go send McCarthy over there. Fine. But yeah, I love these two options the most, and would throw the Broncos in here for the same reason.
Yeah, I mean, we know Telesco pretty well. He's never going to be the person that's going to be like the most aggressive, most desperate at the table, right? So if you have the Vikings, the Raiders, the Broncos, all at the table trying to get up to 5, the Raiders are going to lose out on that battle because the Vikings are very clearly desperate. The Broncos are desperate enough to say, hey, man, we'll also include Patrick Surtain in any trade. And it's like, okay. So that was a little bit more difficult to quantify from a points perspective because you'd be potentially getting a player. But those two teams, I think, are way more desperate than the Raiders would be because the Raiders have Gardner Minshew. There's no, they obviously have Aiden O'Connell as well. So the Raiders are not like, hey, if we have to go into next season with these guys, we're we're just quaking in our boots. I think they feel comfortable with either of those two guys starting. Whereas the Broncos, it's well, you have Jarrett Stidham and I think Ben DiNucci right now is their QB2. So I think the Broncos would be way more desperate to get up from 12 than the Raiders would be from 13.
Yeah, I would agree. And hey, I'm done for the whole bidding war between 11, 12, and 13. Hey, show us your best offer.
Then that brings in more tax. So, yeah, should be fun. I'm kind of at the point where the Chargers are in a no lose situation because if QBs go 1 through 4, great, we'll take Marvin Harrison Jr. gladly. If QBs go 1 through 3, Cardinals stick and pick, then great, we're going to trade down and we're going to get a haul. So it's a great spot to be in for the Chargers right now.
Yeah, I agree. Really good spot. And again, people are saying, the Chargers will never pick this high again. So they should take someone at 5. But again, they'll never be in this position again. So they can never get this much trade value in a trade down.
Yeah.
Hopefully ever again.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Last scenario here is the double trade down. We want to create some more picks, as many picks as we can this year. This is a volume approach. If you've been listening to the Bootleg Football guys, they've talked about a double trade down scenario for the Chargers several times here. So this is our scenario that we are presenting and how they could potentially go about this and the kind of picks that they could accumulate this way.
Yeah, so the Chargers, obviously we talked about the Jets trade, there's the Bears trade, either works. And of course, there's several combinations of teams you could do here, right? But we decided to go with one that we already mentioned, so trading with the Bears or the Jets. So let's say it's the Bears, you trade back, you get to number 9, you get 75th overall, you gain 550 points of draft value. Then you trade back again. It sounds like the Colts want to move up for some sort of pass catcher. It seems like everyone's like Brock Bowers. And I'd get it. I would hate to trade away from Malik Neighbors and then trade away from Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
2 in a row like that. But again, if your goal is to get an offensive lineman, then you could do worse. So you could then trade from 9 to 15 with the Colts and get 82nd overall. So the Chargers going from 5 to 15 would get at minimum the 75th pick in this draft and the number 82 pick in this draft. And again, I ran through this simulation with those 2 extra picks, and it was just like free players. And it is.
Yeah.
So this is, and you can still take at 15 Brian Thomas Jr. So, Chargers fans will breathe a sigh of relief. They'll still get the receiver, a very good one, who definitely that top 15. That's perfect. And then also pick up 2 more picks in the 3rd round in a freaking deep class. Like it's a heck of a haul. It's a bummer to trade out of Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but picking up at minimum 2 third-round picks is really enticing.
Yeah, I think this would be at minimum. I know people would see just this screenshot and be like, "That's not enough." I agree with you. I think
Totally.
in this kind of scenario, you potentially are getting, like I mentioned earlier, that 2025 second from the Bears. You're probably also getting like maybe a fourth or a fifth from the Colts kind of deal. In this scenario, you're trading one pick for probably 5 or 6 picks, depending on like how exactly the other
Yeah.
GMs are valuing those things. So this is a volume thing. And then at pick number 15, you have Byron Murphy here. I don't think it's unreasonable that they would select him at 15. They could take Johnny Newton at 15. They could take one of the corners at 15, one of the offensive tackles. It just gives them so many possibilities. And then you have 15, 37. You would have at least 2 third-round picks. You have 2 fourth-round picks, probably 2 fifth-round picks. Like, you just stack up volume here for the Chargers and say, hey, we're going to get to like 12, 13 picks this year and just like completely overhaul this team in a hurry. So I know it would be very difficult, and I agree, like passing on the blue chip pass catchers, but if they did this scenario, I would be pretty happy with it, honestly, just because they have so many needs. And like you mentioned, just get a lot of dart throws at the board.
Yeah, this is only 4 years of actually watching college for me, right? But this is my favorite class by far, and it's
Yeah.
specifically great at positions the Chargers absolutely need. So you figure out your team, you bring in a ton of players. If you want to make that 2025 push, like a lot of Chargers fans want, and of course beyond, to have like kind of like the Chiefs did, rolling into year 2 with elite young defensive talent, roll that into year 2 with your quarterback.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chiefs did very well with that. So getting a haul, because they made 2 firsts, 2 seconds, right,
Yep.
in that class.
Yep.
Not that Sky Moore super worked out, but you know what I mean. Like they built
Yeah.
themselves a heck of a defense by accumulating picks like this, and the Chargers could do that this year because that 75th pick, that 82nd pick, that to me feels like top 50 pick next year or in last year's class.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole different ball game. It's a very different level than it usually is.
Yeah, we kind of talked about like the receiver class on Thursday, but I have 21st round grades this year. I think I only had like 13 last year.
Yeah.
So like in every like not at tight end position, but overall talent wise, this class is better. I have way more second round grades this year. I have more third round grades this year. This is a stacked position. This is a stacked draft, like up and down the board for me. Like my top 50 was like very difficult to figure out like who I wanted to get in there and not. And so this is a class where if you can stack up different positions, man, like I think it just makes really a lot of sense for where this team is at. You get all these young players in, you try and develop them. And then next year they have like $120 million in cap space right now projected. So I know everybody wants to win this year. I know they have publicly said they want to win this year, but this double trade down scenario really does give them the most flexibility long term. And then next year you can make your huge push in free agency and then just like go make a huge swing for the AFC title game next year.
Yeah. I like the haul. And again, what's presented here is just kind of, it still gets them, value, of course, but there's more to be had here.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. All right. So those were our trade down scenarios. Hopefully you guys liked it. Well, we could also do like a day 2 scenarios. That's obviously a little bit more difficult to project, but either way, I do think the Chargers are going to be active on draft night. Okay, so we'll take questions for about 15 minutes. Is that cool, Tyler?
Yeah, no problem.
All right, cool. So we have some super chats. We'll get to those super chats. Otherwise, you guys can fire away any kind of questions that you want regarding to the draft or whatever the case may be. You can fire away here. So, I'm sorry. We always do that. Brian Stowe wants to know, I hope we draft best player at pick. I assume that's 37. Not try to draft Michigan players as a priority. I tend to agree. Like some of the Michigan players are like, yeah, like they're going to draft a bunch of us. I don't know, man. Like all of them are kind of like worth pick 37. Like Dane Brugler was saying on the Athletic Football Show this week that he thinks Junior Colson could sneak into the first round, like based off of the linebacker need. So you can't take Roman Wilson, Junior Colson, Mike Samerstill, and Chris Jenkins. Like you're probably taking one of those guys, and then you're probably taking like a day 3 defensive player too, if that.
Yeah, that's kind of what it feels like to me. I mean, Jack Campbell went like what 20th or 18th or something in the first round last year.
Yeah.
I believe I had Jack Campbell ranked like graded higher, but still, I didn't expect 18th in the draft. That's for sure. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't know if Colson goes in the first round, but again, didn't think Campbell would either.
I don't think so either, but he mentioned that like teams have Colson as consensus linebacker one, which they should. He's
Mm,
the best linebacker in my eyes, but
yeah, I agree.
um, just like how many offensive tackles there are and wide receivers, I have a hard time believing that. But that's how the league views him, and so I think they probably have to take him at 37 if they want him at this point. And same thing with Samerstill, same thing with Chris
Mhm.
Jenkins. It's just like that's where that group is, and then we'll see what they do on like day 2. But I'd be pretty surprised if they draft more than 3. I think 3 is like at most what I would see.
Yeah, I could see that. There's a lot of players, so the odds of them drafting one is higher. But yeah, I think 2 sounds about right. Someone on day 2, and then one of those kind of day 3, floaters, because there's like 8 other eligible draft picks on day
Yeah.
3.
Dane really likes McGregor, the edge rusher / defensive tackle guy.
Okay. Yeah, me too.
So they did an episode of like their guys, like the My Guy episode that we did. And
Yeah.
McGregor was one of Dane's day 3 guys that he chose.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I could see that. You're looking at somebody instead of like a Miles Cole or like a Cedric Johnson. Like I get it. I think there's maybe more there.
Yeah. Okay. Next one here from Gary. I think we kind of answered this. Are you going to do a show, multiple trade back scenarios? We did do that. He says he's a big admirer. We appreciate that, Gary. And he wants to know how we find time to do all of this, Tyler.
Honestly, I have no idea. I don't know how we find time to do this other than we just maximize our time. I know, we both work in education, so we have to be on campus at a certain time every day. So we're probably up by like, I don't know, 6:15, whatever, to drive and get to work. Home by like 3:34, depending on, the schedule. And then we do this. I don't know, honestly, how I have this, my full-time job, and my wife stays with me is completely beyond me, dude.
Yeah. I watch a lot of film like while we're watching TV. So I'll multitask and like we'll watch whatever show or like a game, like a basketball game or something like that. But every time I go to grab my computer, Brooke kind of gives like a little sigh. She's like, again. I'm like, yeah, like I gotta get these players graded, But Brooke's very supportive of everything. She loves the fact that I have this kind of creative outlet and the community that we've built. So whenever we go to training camp or games or whatever, people always are very nice and come up and say hi to us. And Brooke's very supportive of it. So appreciate Brooke for doing that. This will all change once we start to have a family, but for now, I have the time and the willingness, and I don't have a child, so it works out great for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's helpful that both of our wives are busy.
Yeah.
So if they have things in their lives they have to do that are meaningful. My wife's going to school currently, but she also works. Your wife is a teacher, so it's like they have things they have to do too.
Yeah.
So that's good because they have things to do, which means I get to do things.
Yeah. So like next Thursday, Brooke is going to go. She has to go supervise a play at the school. So like,
cool.
It works out.
Nice.
Got a super sticker from Miss Mama Shun. Appreciate Mama Shun. She's always in here.
Yeah, we just worked out together this
nice.
morning. Yeah, we all went to the gym, worked out together, so that was fun.
Nice. Family that works out together stays together.
I think so.
Frank up here next. Why would the Chargers go Neighbors over Odunze? Odunze is a true X receiver. We drafted QJ last year, parentheses Yak, and Rome culturally seems like a great fit, especially with Keenan out.
So I am about this close to having Odunze over Neighbors.
Oh,
I don't think I'll get to that point, but it's very hard. So I did my wide receiver rankings yesterday, and I was typing like, okay, some things about Rome Odunze. There's a quick like excerpt about him. It's hard to find the thing you don't like. It's just a stylistic preference at this point. So like Frank says, like Rome Odunze, like the Chargers, there's so much discussion about Joe Alt and Malik Neighbors at 5, but it feels like Rome Odunze and like JC Latham, like those guys kind of fit Harbaugh more. and what they'd want. So I don't know, man. I don't actually have an answer for you other than they want an explosive yards after catch, more a speedier threat. But why like Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, why they would specifically want Neighbors over Odunze, just they would grade him better. But in terms of fit, like Odunze does fit them more.
Yeah, I tend to agree there, and it is really close. Like I do have Neighbors ahead of Adunze,
Mm-hmm.
but they're both really close for me. I have Neighbors at a 7.5 grade, and I have Adunze at a 7.45 grade.
Yeah,
Both blue chip players, like they're right there neck and neck. So I think that we should be talking about Odunze as a possibility. I think everything you look at him, he's just such a clean prospect. And there are people, Ben Solak was on this channel yesterday saying that he does have Odunze ahead of Neighbors too. So it does just kind of depend what you think of the offense. We kind of you brought up the whole like which prospect can reach their ceiling here more. I do kind of have some questions about like what this offense looks like with Neighbors and like how much they really are able to maximize him. I mean, Hollywood Brown was like a good receiver, and I objectively was not even close to what Neighbors is as a receiver, but that role does not produce a ton of volume. Like it's kind of like, essentially like a wide receiver 2 role. It's not like they're going to funnel, 150 targets to that kind of role. At least that's how the offense has operated in the past. So Odunze as the X, I think, is more likely to get the volume of maximizing his talent. Same thing with Harrison Jr., because I think this offense values in a true X receiver more than a slot receiver. And that's Neighbors can do some Z stuff too, but it's not like Zay Flowers had 120 catches last year. Like the volume was pretty limited for him.
Yeah. So, but then again, it's the argument of, well, neither of these guys have Herbert's arm, so who's best fits? But then you can flip it the other way. Okay, who has the most EPA per target? Who has the highest success rate with? It's not anybody else. It's Mike Williams, who is the bigger X receiver. That, and the next best EPA per target is Donald Parham, who's huge. Another, obviously Odunze is not 6'9", but maybe they go to Herbert and say, what is the stylistic preference for you? And Herbert goes, maybe I just prefer a Romo Odunze type. I don't know.
Yeah. Possible for sure. Kapil asking about our live streaming. Yes, we are live streaming the entire weekend, starting on Thursday at 4:30. We'll be live on Friday as well as Saturday. So a lot of opportunity for you guys to come in here and have a good time. We'll have some breakdowns of each player that the Chargers take at each selection. So should be a ton of fun here. Belt Media wants to know if the Chargers trade 5 for Vikings 11, and I assume that should say 23. Would you rather draft Bowers and Powers Johnson or Fuanga and Xavier Worthy?
Wow. Okay. At that, so if it's 11 and 23, it feels very Bowers and Powers Johnson to me. Yeah, I would go with Brock Bowers and Jackson Powers Johnson. You trade back to 11 and still get Brock Bowers, like holy cow, what an A+ move.
Yeah, 100%. I also am completely uninterested in Xavier Worthy in any first round conversation. Him at 23, like I could stomach it because he's fast, right? Like he's a receiver, he adds a weapon, fills a role that this offense has used in the past. But at 23, you're definitely looking at A.D. Mitchell on the board, maybe Brian Thomas Jr. You're talking about Ladd McConkey on the board. You're talking about Jalen Polk on the board. Like I'm not taking Xavier Worthy over those guys in this offense. I just am not.
No.
Yeah. Teresa Papas wants to know who our favorite corner fits in this Jesse Minter defense are.
Jerry and Jones sounds great at slot corner. I mean, yes, there's Mike Sanders still as well, but I feel like the instinctive way Jones plays, the elite RAS, like he's not a big corner, but neither is Sanders still, who's a converted wide receiver. So I just think the way that he plays, the instincts he plays with, the aggressiveness, Jones I think is a great fit. Obviously we talked about Terrion Arnold. Like I think a lot of these early round corners do fit in some way, but Arnold feels like the best fit. I don't know. The ones that we've mentioned several times, those also happen to be, I think, my favorite fits.
Yeah, I did. We've talked a lot about this topic. I did watch a Jarvis Brownlee Jr. from
Hmm.
Louisville this week. Um, Instantly thought of Chauncey Gardner Johnson from the Eagles and
Okay.
Lions and as a comp for him, just like that kind of style. So I think the Chargers kind of have to double dip here at corner. They need a starting slot corner, and then they need a potential starter slash 2025 starter at outside corner
Hmm.
because Asante Samuel Jr. is a free agent after this year, and Christian Fulton's only on a 1 year deal, and Fulton has missed a ton of games. So they need to probably take two corners in the top 110 with one of those two picks in the fourth round. So at 37, maybe you take Sanger still. Maybe at pick number 69, that's the spot that you target your slot corner. And then on round 4, that's where you target kind of like your bigger, faster outside corner guy. So
Yeah.
I think they'll be pretty active in the cornerback room just because they don't have any long-term assets there. But yeah, we've talked about some of those guys. Jarvis Brownlee, I think, would fit, although he's probably more of a 5th round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bleacher Report had him as like a day, or no, excuse me, round 7 kind of selection. Like they didn't like him.
Okay. All right. I like him a lot. I know
Me too.
Jim Nagy, the Senior Bowl guy, says that he has a lot of fans in the league. So maybe it's like a 4th, 5th round pick. I don't know. But I think stylistically he fits what they want at the slot for sure.
Hmm.
Okay, back to a super chat here from Brian. Is it possible that the Chargers don't take an offensive lineman on day 1 or day 2? What are the odds of that? At the very least, I would think they take a defensive lineman.
I hate doing odds. I don't know, 37%. But yeah, it is possible because okay, let's say they think Trey Pipkins is the starter. Okay, great. Then you look at the history of what the Ravens have done until Linderbaum. Their other like 8 starting centers were taken as day 3 picks or undrafted free agents, or they traded a 5th round pick for that center. So yeah, there's a high likelihood they wait till round 4 and do it. We maybe have done before, like Hunter Norzad, or whoever they didn't want to take, Bo Limmer. So
Yeah,
it's possible.
it is possible, especially if they just feel like they need to play the board and then, the board doesn't fall a certain way. Galadriel's just having a good time right now. It is possible. I do happen to think that they take one in the top 70, but we'll see. Alan N says long snapper at 5. Long snapper is one of the few positions the Chargers are set at. So I know I appreciate the joke though for sure, and the super chat from Alan.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe Joel can long snap too, just in case.
Honestly, wouldn't surprise me. Maybe Josh Harris can play like linebacker or something too.
And he can tackle, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he can hit.
Brian Stowe, draft Tavondre Sweat later in the draft? ?
Probably yes, but yeah, probably yes. At a certain point, the answer is yes. Like no matter how, if he falls, like at a certain point, if he continues to fall, the answer is yes. But Chargers got to, figure that out on their end because there's now 2 big red flags there.
Yeah. So Dane Brugler mentioned this a couple weeks ago. He feels like before the DWI, he was trending towards being a late day 2 pick. And now he's like pretty consensus, like day 3 pick. I think Dan Jeremiah has also talked about this same thing where like best case scenario for him seems to be like a compensatory 3rd round pick just because there's like some real red flags there from a character perspective. And then also he gets arrested a month before the draft. So fortunate for him, it does seem like he's going to be falling in the draft.
Yeah.
Dennis says that Steven and Brooke need a puppy. We do have a dog. Sully is his name. He's 6 years old. So he's a sheep doodle mix. So he's not small enough to snuggle up on me like that. But we do have a dog for what it's worth.
Yeah. I think he's been in the background before.
I try and always record with the door shut. So maybe, I don't know. But yeah, we do have a dog.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll wrap up with some of these other super chats here. Brian says, "Is it weird that I think that Odunze will have the edge for run blocking alone? I feel like that's underrated and not talked about since both Neighbors and Harrison aren't consistent or great run blockers."
Yeah, it's over Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know about that specific one, but over Neighbors, yeah, I could see that. Again, there's a physical
Yeah.
element that Odunze has, the Neighbors doesn't have.
Yeah, I do think it's a fair thing to discuss and bring up, specifically for the Chargers. Like, I don't think teams are going to say, "Hey, like we're going to pass on this top 5 wide receiver just because one guy blocks
Right.
better." It adds to his fit with the team, but I don't
Mhm.
think that would be a reason why teams would have him higher. But I
Mm.
totally get like overall point is stylistically a fit, yeah, because Odunze he's much tougher on the perimeter. Like he's able to beat press, he's able to, get guys up at the catch point, he's able to block. So stylistically, I do think he is more of a Harbaugh guy than Neighbors
Mhm.
is. But does that mean he's better? Maybe not. Maybe yes. Kind of depends.
In Harbaugh, we trust will be tested on Thursday.
yeah, yeah. For what it's worth, I do also think that Brian Thomas fits like stylistically as well
Mhm.
what they want.
Mhm.
Gary says 2 trade ups in the first 10, then trade back to 15. Crazy, I know. Is this saying that I'm a little confused by this one?
2 trade ups in the first 10, then a trade back to 15.
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
well, maybe 2 teams trade up into the top 10
Oh, okay.
or 2 trades. Okay, so I see. I think he means the trade that we kind of talked about. So the Bears are
Gotcha.
already in the top 10, but they trade up, and the Colts trade into the top 10, and we trade back to 15. Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Belt Media back in here. Is DJ Chark going to sign with the Chargers? He did visit with the Chargers earlier this week. That kind of has been an indication of players who sign with the Chargers, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'm a little conflicted here. I don't think DJ Chark is really the veteran receiver I would prefer. He, he's kind of just like a really worse version of Mike Williams, and I'm kind of like I don't understand that one.
Hmm. I do think that them meeting with wait, sorry, did they meet with Boyd, or is that just a rumor?
So they expressed interest in Boyd. They've expressed interest in Marquez Valdez-Scantling, according to Jeremy Fowler.
Mhm.
DJ Chark is the one that they have met with. So
Okay.
they hosted him on a visit. They have not hosted any receivers on a visit that we know of.
Gotcha. I definitely think that they're going the veteran receiver route at some point, pre or post the draft. I don't think you have this much interest in bringing guys in. So I think that someone's going to be a Charger. Someone's going to be signed to be a Charger, I think.
Yeah. As LD Burn points out, doesn't move the needle, but they need camp bodies alone.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. They only have 4 receivers on the roster right now.
One's a returner.
And one of them is a returner and doesn't really function as a wide receiver right now.
No.
So stylistically, though, like I think people who like DJ Chark were like, "Oh, like he's so fast, like he could play really great." Like he is big and fast, but stylistically, he's not what you're picturing. Like people kind of framed him as like a burner type, and that's not who he is. Like he's a boundary X receiver, doesn't create a lot of separation. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is like your burner type. If that's what you want, that's the veteran receiver that you want.
Yeah. And then Matt Harmon, who does the reception perception profiles, was less than enthused about the idea of a Chark signing.
Yeah. Josh Norris, I was tweeting back and forth with somebody, and they were like, "Oh, like Chark would be our best receiver," and I was like, "Absolutely not! Like that's Palmer 100% of the day."
Yeah, easily.
And Josh Norris saw it, and he was like, "Yeah, Chark was terrible last year." So
great.
there you go.
Can we get one more question in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, last one from Frank. Ravens have a trend of taking guys that had an injury fall in the draft with a big upside. Is there a player that fits that?
Jackson Powers Johnson would fit that.
Yeah.
Kool-Aid McKinstry would fit that, although he could still go pretty early.
Yeah.
Johnny Newton.
I don't know if Brooks really counts. Kind of. But it's not like Ojabo, who like could not play football that year. So
yeah. I'm trying to think of guys that like are currently injured and like not potentially to play this season.
Mostly just histories and red flags. Like Mims didn't play a ton.
Yeah.
But he's fine. Like he tested fine, obviously.
Because they traded back into the draft to take Andrew Hortiz. but he like tore his ACL at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's any players like that are like, maybe I'm missing some, but
Rasheen Ali, I think, didn't test. My dog.
She's kind of like a cat, dude. Like she's kind of.
Oh yeah, when we go on like road trips, she just flat out will just like she'll just like climb around this side and just like be my headrest.
I'm gonna grab Sully real quick because I saw somebody mention that.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna sit here and entertain people. Wasn't one of the Michigan linemen injured at the end of the season? Oh, very good call. I remember who took over for him. That was Trent Jones. It was either Barnhart that got hurt or the other guy. Oh, Peyton Wilson. Yeah, that's a great call there. I think he doesn't get out of the second round, but he's a person with injury history. Oh, Zinter. Thank you. So yeah, Zinter. He just scared another one out of me. I had it. Oh, where'd he go?
Okay, this is Sully for those who have never seen him. Oh,
that's just Steven's beard. Oh, hi,
there he
Sully.
is.
Hey, yo. Oh,
Sully.
Want to say hi to each other. Now I'm gonna have a dog date. All right, I'll have to turn my dog. Okay, this is what we're doing.
There you go. There's Sully, everybody.
There's the doggy. Give us a handstand while Steven is gone. Okay, hold on.
Wait, you're actually gonna do a handstand right now?
Yeah, you pay me $2, I'll do whatever. I
got a super chat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. All right. There's no room for this, so I'm gonna give it a whirl. I'm gonna mute myself so you don't hear me like crying if I fall. But
this is unhinged right now. I think we would definitely get a handstand from Tyler if they take Marvin Harrison Jr. for what it's worth. There we go. Oh, there we go. Nice job.
Dance, monkey, dance. Hey, you know what? Brian took it back. You can't take it back. I did 2 of them. I lost my chair.
You lost your chair?
No, I just moved it and I realized I didn't bring it back.
Okay.
I just shoved it out of the way.
Nice. Nice.
All right, I'm just like crouch. All right, here we go.
I think that's a good place to end the show. You guys met Sully and you saw Tyler do a handstand.
Thanks.
All right, there we go. All right, guys. I appreciate you for tuning in today. We'll be live on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday next week to cover the draft. We appreciate all of you for tuning in. We'll see you on Monday. As always.
Oops.
Bolt up.
See ya.